Hello everyone, this is Melanie from Melanie B's Creative Studio and welcome back to my channel. This week for Schipper Sunday, it's going to be a follow-up to last week's Schipper Sunday where I introduced you guys to the paint by number flow technique. I wanted to make sure that I clarified a few things that I did not mention last week in the first video. In addition, after I've had time this week to play with the technique, and you can see that I have done a ton of painting this week, which never happens because for 2022, I told myself I was going to spend more time working on my own projects for my own Zen therapy. So I have kind of stopped work every day by 6:00 p.m. and I am no longer working weekends. So having said that, I played with this flow method, this flow technique, and I am obsessed with it. And I wanted to bring you this weekend for Schipper Sunday more of the tricks and tips that I learned throughout this week in my painting sessions. So I thought that's what we would do. But the first thing I wanted to mention was the original technique was not Lucas's technique. And I don't know if I made that sound like he invented this or created this method. He didn't. He actually shared a video based on what he had found in the Schipper instructions. And this is where I had gotten a little confused. I knew he had found the technique elsewhere, either in Dimensions or Schipper instructions, and then put it into a video and then shared the video. But I did not include that information with you guys because I wasn't sure which company he had gotten the original instructions from. And so I didn't give credit to the company. And it goes to show you how much people actually read the instructions when they get a kit. I didn't realize the very first page of the Schipper manual that comes in the kits, which I have, 25 Schipper kits, it's given us these instructions right here. So I wanted to make sure Schipper got credit for the method, okay? So what we did, Lucas and I, took the method and put it into a visual format, which was his clip and then my video, and gave us a little more in-depth demonstration. Today, we're going to go even further into that demonstration and talk about how to fill in larger cells and more detailed tiny cells. And some of the things that I learned this week and some suggestions and recommendations that I'm going to make for you, things that I figured out and that what I'm going to be doing in the future to feel like I'm getting the best overall finished results. Now, everything I'm bringing to you in videos are recommendations. I'm never going to tell you how to finish your pieces. You guys, you do you, boo-boo, okay? That is my overall advice to everyone out there. You do you, boo-boo, okay? But I'm always going to have a method for you and my advice for you that has worked for me. And the reason I do that is so that you do not spend time, especially if you're a new paint by number enthusiast, you're not wasting time trying to figure all this out for yourself. It kind of gives you a starting point, and then you can over time figure out what your best method is. It will keep you from having to start from, like I call, the bare minimum of knowledge. So that is what I like to do for you as a YouTube creator, and so that's what I'm hoping my videos are able to do for you. Everything I'm going to tell you about really quickly as far as tools go are in the description below. There are links. Everything that I'm going to show you is also available at melaniebscreativesupplies.com. That link will be right here. As far as visually being able to see it, you won't be able to click and go, but you will be able to click and go if you use the link in the description. Right here is the new Melanie B's 3-in-1 brush cleaning system. This is what I use now to clean my brushes. Step one's over here in this water cup. I have two of the round water cups. One is for rinsing my brush and one is for the stir sticks when I am mixing Flow Aid and diluted Flow Aid into my paint pots. I'm able to put the stir sticks back in here. The stainless stir sticks are also at the website. I have a bottle of plain Flow Aid and a bottle of diluted Flow Aid. Those glass bottles also at the website. I also have my paintbrushes, and I will tell you which paintbrushes I'm using while I'm working. In addition, I have the Schipper kit, Parrots in the Rainforest, and I have done an original video on this piece back on a Schipper Sunday. I can put a link in the description about the original video. I will also put a link for the video for last week, which is the original introduction to the pay by number flow method. And then I can put a little I right here that if you want to click and watch that video first, you can go do that. In addition to my paintbrushes, what I'm also going to use is something that I just happen to have in my stash because I am obsessed with watercolor painting. And one thing I found that works really well were watercolor paintbrushes. So I'm going to use, another thing I have is a paper towel over here, just because this process can get a little bit messy. And I have a dry paper towel, and eventually this will probably get kind of wet and it's good for cleanup. And I like to have a dry paper towel to get excess water off my brush, so that's what I'm using this one for. But I like to have a watercolor paintbrush, and I actually have two here that I had and I don't know where I got them. So what I'm going to do is link you in the bottom to a couple of watercolor type brushes, and I'm going to zoom in real quick so we can get a good look at the bristles on these brushes so you'll see what I'm talking about and why I think these are really good for this method. So I have two different sizes. They're pretty close to being the same. This one is actually a double aught, and this one is just a 0. And I'm also going to be using a couple of the Melanie B's spotter brushes from the mini detail set. I'm going to use the 2/0 spotter. I'm going to go ahead and rinse it. I used my conditioning soap last night from the 3-in-1 brush cleaner, so I'm going to go ahead and rinse that off and get it ready. That is the 2/0. I'm going to also be using possibly the 5/0, and I'll rinse it and have it ready here. And for the tiny detail areas, I'm going to use the 20/0, which has a tiny point. Now all three of my spotter brushes are available in one set, and that is the mini detail 5-piece set, so you can get them all together in one set. These two, I'm not sure where these came from. I've had them so long. I originally bought them for paint by number, and I said, obviously those aren't going to work because all I saw was a photo, and when I got them I was like, what am I doing with these? So I saved them not knowing if I'd ever use them. That's why they were still in the package, and I will try to find you something similar. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, because of this method, I will be creating brushes of my own for this method, and the ones that I will create will have shorter handles because we in paint by number do not need long handles. Most of the watercolor brushes you will find will have super long handles. They're not comfortable. Mine will probably end up, once I'm able to custom design them, will have a triangular handle that's more comfortable for more close-up type of painting for our use. So what you can use in the meantime, I wouldn't spend a lot of money on them, but you need a fluffy brush, and you need a brush that's going to hold a lot of liquid, and that is why the watercolor brushes are nice, because they will hold a lot of water. So that is why I have these two here. Now I've also pulled a couple of other watercolor brushes from a set I had purchased a long time ago, and they were so long and they're super cheap, and I don't like them. I never used them, but you can see this one's, the paint is even coming off the handle even though I never used it. So I hate them, but I thought I would try them for super large openings to demonstrate with, because you know I'm gonna end up making my own at some point. These have larger brush heads, so if I need them, I will have them. I hate these super long handles. Look how long that is. They're not gonna be easy to control for us. I mean, we're gonna hold them, you know, a little closer here, which means it's gonna be hard to balance. But for now, this is what I'm gonna be using. This company also calls this a zero, which is much larger than that zero. So you know how brush companies have different sizes for brushes, and it just depends on the company. So let's go ahead and get everything moved aside and jump into the painting, and we'll start with some tiny detail areas first, and then I will move into showing you how to do the large areas. So what I'm gonna do is I'm starting on one of the other panels that has probably the tiniest opening of all of the panels. There's not a lot of really small openings on this entire painting. So it was difficult to find one that had a very small opening. So this is probably the smallest. So I'm gonna go in with the 20/0, my tiniest paintbrush, into this number 18. So before I start working on this, I'm gonna kind of slide this aside, and I'm gonna move this here so I can add the flow aid that I need, because I have not used this color yet. And I'm going in with straight flow aid first. Now I want to mention that Schipper doesn't necessarily recommend flow aid. They say use water. I am not trying to undermine the manufacturer's recommendation. I just know that when I use flow aid, I get a good result because it does not dilute the paint opacity. So that is why I use flow aid. You can also use diluted flow aid, but I use 8 drops to 10 drops of regular flow aid, and a lot of people are going to say, oh my gosh, you use that much. This is what I learned this week. I'm going to start with 8. I'd rather use less than more to begin with. I'm going to stir this. And as I did last week, I'm going to mix up what is in this top part as well. And I'm going to check it. And I want it a little thinner. That is very nice, but I want it a little thinner, and I'm going to tell you why. I noticed that I'm using a lot of paint, a lot more than I usually do. And for me, that is a little scary because I don't normally run out of paint. So for me, at this point, I can add 2 to 3 drops of diluted flow aid. Let's go with 3 and mix it in. So I'm going to salvage every single drop of this paint by getting it off my stir stick. Now, what I have is a nice mixture with the perfect consistency of paint, but I'm not losing opacity, because if I had added that much water, I would have lost a lot of opacity and my paint wouldn't have as much pigment. So I would have watered it down instead of thinning it down, which means I would have had to do 2 coats. And it wouldn't have covered as well, which would kind of defeat the purpose. So now that my paint is exactly the texture and consistency I need, I'm going to move my surface back over, going in with my smallest brush. I'm going to hold it really carefully right here for the camera. I'm going to dip, just like we did last week, and get a little bit on the end of my brush. Now, if you notice, if I don't get a teardrop, I can go up here where it's a little thicker, and I'm going to get a little bit more. This is the brush I'm going to outline with. So here I'm going to go in with the 5/0, and I started with the 20/0, and I think it's just too small. This opening is much larger than I anticipated. So I'm going to go with the 5/0, and I want to start lightly touching the outside. I may even need to get this thinner, honestly, because I want this to be puddling up, and I just don't feel like it's puddling like I want. But when I start making what I call a wall, this is going to prevent anything I put in between from going anywhere. So I'm going to stop there, and then I'm coming back with my 2/0, which is a much larger brush. I'm going to dip in and get a nice amount, which looks like a ton, right? And I'm gonna touch it in the middle and leave it there. And then I'm gonna let it just sit until it dries. Now that looks like a lot, doesn't it? But it will dry with almost like a three-dimensional raised area that is beautiful. Now I can continue with this brush, this 2/0, which looks very big, and fill in without any issues. Now if I get a lot like this, I can drop off the big part of that and pull it. This is just for troubleshooting purposes to show you. Pull it where I need it, barely touching it, so that it puts the excess paint where I want it without going outside the lines. So if you get too much, that is what you do with it. If you get too much and you notice before you put it down, you can always take it to the side of your paint pot. Let me pull my paint pot a little bit, wipe it off. But if you get enough, if you get just enough, take it straight to the line, and I go over the line. You'll notice. Now, when I've got the line filled, I'm going back, taking a little blob of paint, and I'm actually adding another heap, is what I like to call it, of paint to give it that extra dimension. And because I've already put up what I call my wall, it's staying where I'm putting it. So this is already drying right here. Of course, I'm in a very warm room right now with the door shut, but I can add more just like that. So I wish I could show you the dimension that that's creating. And I don't know if you can see it. See that? All right, so I'm leaving it there. Now, one thing I want to point out, this is an important tip. You want to work on a flat surface. So I have been using the Waka lap desk that I brought to you at Christmas time. I'm obsessed with that desk. I love it at an angle, but this particular method is not conducive to using at an angle. You need it flat. So I do paint with it in my lap flat because I don't want any of this leaning in one way or the other. So it cannot use an easel. This needs to be on a flat surface if you want it to be flat. I am also painting on an unprepped surface. I did not use gesso on these panels, but I'm going to tell you that I will be using gesso on future Schipper paintings because I feel like when I'm doing even this method that I'm still seeing the paint going down into the little grooves of the texture. And I also feel like I'm not getting really smooth lines because of that texture. So I will be gessoing my surfaces. You do not have to. That is just my personal preference. That is just me, and I will be coming back, and I know I keep saying it, but I'm still testing some products for future purposes and gessoing your Schipper in a different method for an upcoming video. So just be patient with me on that, and promise I'm going to be bringing you a new method for gessoing your Schipper. But you do not have to do that for this method. This works beautifully, but I feel like I would get a little better coverage, and I feel like it would give me straighter lines. All right, so while I've got this brush, I'm going to go ahead and let's do another number 18. And I'm going to show you that just continuing to use the 2/0 Melanie B brush, that you can do some of these other cells. So see this blob? What I can do is, even though I've got more than I would want to do for an outline, I can drop off that little bit, and then I can take this point, and I like to outline, okay? A fine outline. Redip. And once you outline on the line itself, you're not avoiding the line, you're actually taking it to the line. Now I want a lot of paint. There we go. There we go. I needed to rinse my brush actually because I talked, and I am dropping off blobs of paint, puddles of paint. But if I place an outline down, I am giving myself a line that's holding that paint in place. So let me show you again. Let me go ahead and put up an outline. Even if it's not a tall amount of paint, now I can go in here, drop off puddles of paint. And I hope this is visually easy for you guys to see. And I want this to be the same height throughout the entire cell. So I can add more paint all over the cell. And you see how it's not running out of that line that I originally put down? So I'm gonna let this kind of raise itself up. See if you can see all of that dimension. Now I'm gonna rinse my brush just for making sure it's good and clean. I'm gonna reshape it over here on my pad that's wet with the preservation solution. It's probably about to dry because it's so hot in here. Let me go ahead and spray this again. Now, let's try a smaller cell with the same brush. When you have this a little bit and you're outlining, the lighter you touch, the thinner your line, right? See how that same brush, I'm using the same 2/0, and you see how my lines aren't straight because of the texture of the surface. This is why I was talking about using gesso. I would get straighter lines if I didn't have to worry about those little ripples on my surface, but that's just me being extra like OCD. So if I've outlined it just lightly, then I can take back the puddles of paint. See that big puddle? And if I drop it in there, it's not going outside those lines. And that is why I really like this method. And you see how quick that is? So I'm not having to fill in the entire surface. So normally when we paint, you know, a cell, we're having to paint it and we're filling it in. I'm about to be out of the camera here. Let's move our board and see how we're having to make lots of strokes. Now, normally I'd be using a flat brush in this cell, whatever, and we get a beautiful smooth finish, right? Well, for this, I can come back and add more paint. And I have the same finished result, but all I have to do is outline it and then fill it in instead of painting the entire surface and then filling it in. So I hope that makes sense. Now I want to show you what to do in larger openings while this is drying. And I filled in a lot of really large openings on the other panel with the parrots. Let's see if you can pick up the texture with the lighting. I'm not really, there we go. Let's see if that light is picking up the different texture. Now where I could really see it was in the blues down here. And the fact that it's going faster when I really thought it would go slower, because once I got the hang of this method, it was just so completely quick. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to let that other panel dry. I'm going to go in with number 22, which is a large cell. I'm going to paint this one using these watercolor brushes and kind of show you my method for the larger cells and show you what I've figured out for the largest cells. Now I'm going to tell you my struggle with black. I almost wish that I had started with black because black is a tricky one as far as it's super intimidating. If I could go back and do this again, I would go in with the black first, and I probably would not do the method exactly as three-dimensional as I did all the others, because I'm so concerned about going into other colors around it. So any other color around it that is a light color, I would probably go back and touch up. Thankfully, some of this black didn't have colors already around it, but for future notes for myself, I'm going to do black first and then go around it with lighter colors, just because this method can be a little outside the lines, if that makes sense. So let's go in with a close-up on this one and do a little quick demonstration. And I think it will be done for this follow-up video on the PBN Flow technique.
All right, so I forgot to mention in the beginning, I also had a used 000 watercolor brush from whatever this company is. It says Transcend Art and Brush Company. So what I'm gonna do is go in with the smallest of my watercolor brushes for outlining this. And I need number 22, and I'm gonna prepare it off screen. All right, so I ended up using 10 drops of regular Flow Aid and 3 drops of Diluted Flow Aid to get this the right consistency. I mixed it up, I added some to the top. So I'm gonna keep it very close. Now, this is when it's a little intimidating, when you have fluid paint this close, but it's better to come this way than it is to put it over here and try to come across, you know, an entire painting. So keep it close and dip in. And this is gonna hold a lot of paint because it is a watercolor brush. It's designed to hold a lot. And then I'm going to, because this does not have a nice pointed end on it, it's a little trickier to get a very nice edge. But I take all of that liquid and I kind of push it up against the line. And if I don't feel like I'm getting a crisp line, then I try not to panic. Which you guys know me. I will use a different brush, which I will show you. A lot of people are using a flat brush. I have not started playing with the flat brushes yet to see how much they hold as far as the liquid goes. I would be super comfortable trying a flat brush. In fact, this would probably be a good time for me to try it because this brush is, see, that's what I do if I go over the line, because this is such a fluid paint right now. And that's another reason that you have a paper towel, because it just wipes right off. And that way it's not going to show. It wipes right off. So I'm just pulling up that on the line. Then I can take a much larger brush, and let's go in with this really large. It's never been used. I'm gonna dip it in and get a lot of paint on it and just set it down in a puddle. I'd rather have better quality brushes, but until I invent my own, I don't really want to invest. I'm going to get a little thicker paint. And that is how I'd fill up the larger cell. So now if you get these air bubbles, cheap paintbrush. Maybe I'm spoiled to my own brushes. I'm gonna try it with a flat brush just to do my outlining, like somebody mentioned, and I'm gonna get a little extra liquid because I want it to be thick. Even if it's not completely opaque, I just want to do my outlining with it because I'm not sure how I feel. For me, this is all about the outline. Whatever you feel comfortable, but you don't want it to dry before you can get the center part in there. So that's the trick. See, I'm adding a lot of paint. I'm taking the majority of the paint. I'm gonna rotate this around I could even use a smaller flat brush, whatever I'm comfortable with. I'm gonna have to practice more with this much liquid on it. And then I'm going to go in with that watercolor brush, the one that holds the most liquid. I am not closing this over the surface. It will splatter. See if I can get a little bit of closer video here. Now, as this one's drying, you'll start to see some uneven surface, but it will dry smoother like these here have done. As far as coverage and opacity, I'm noticing that there are still colors that need a little touching up. This was my first attempt at a large cell, and I have a couple little spots that need some touching up. I will just have to go back with a little blob of this bright yellow, and that's it. It's not going to require a lot of yellow. But if you can see the dimension that this creates, I'm going to try to keep it a little slow and hold it where you can see it. So all of this is dried, but you see how it has such a beautiful texture to it. The feathers almost look like feathers without any added impasto or medium besides flow aid.
You guys, I hope you will try this method. I have been so pleased, obviously. I am going to test the method on a canvas and not just the board paintings. I feel like with a canvas, the best way to approach that would be with a gessoed canvas because it won't tend to run outside of that slick surface. I will test that theory in a future video. In the meantime, I hope you guys will try this method. For those of you who have already tried it, I am not teaching you a new way. I'm just showing you what I've learned. Everyone has their own way. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I'm sure it is working beautifully for you. I'm loving doing it this way too. I wish I had discovered this long before now. Again, I want to thank Lucas for bringing it to my attention. I want to thank Schipper for providing me with this painting because it is just gorgeous. And this yummy, delicious palette. I just can't say enough about the painting. Their paints are beautiful as always. Don't forget to join me on Patreon. There's information at the very bottom of the description. If you will go click that, you can find out more information about my Patreon. Join the Facebook group. Join me next week for Schipper Sunday, and thanks as always for watching. I will see you back soon.